Right. Right, good afternoon, everybody. It's 4:31, so let's get started. Welcome to this meeting of the Finance and Assets Committee, and I'd particularly like to welcome all those who are watching the live stream. As is the way with technology, if something goes wrong with the live stream, I will need to sort of pause the meeting while we get that sorted out, but hopefully it won't go wrong anyway. Oh, and just can I remind members in particular that you must have your microphones turned on and speak into it so that people on the live stream can actually hear what's being said. So item 1 is public question time, and we have up to 15 minutes for public questions.
We do have public questions, Chairman, so I'm just going through.
Just for the benefit of the public gallery, the monitoring officer has to check the questions first just to make sure that they're not improper or defamatory or anything, hence the process.
All right, thank you, Tracy. All right, the first one is from Mr. Graham James. Mr. James, would you like to come to the table and read out your question?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon with regard to the Growth and Infrastructure Grant Fund application from Little Thetford Village Hall. I'm here with my wife, who is also a trustee and was involved in preparing the application. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, we would like to publicly thank the officers and councillors of East Cambs District Council for their efforts in obtaining and making this grant funding available. The opportunity to apply for funding such as this does not come about very often, and should we be successful, it will make a significant difference to our village and surrounding communities. As I said in our application, we have full support from our community, as well as Lucy Fraser MP, our district and parish councillors, alongside our other village institutions, including the preschool, the school, the church, the sports social club, and our feast committee. Our project for moving the village hall to a reliance on renewable energy had been something we were working towards, but it became more urgent when subsidence was discovered in the storage area that houses our oil supply. With every threat comes an opportunity, and ours was to bring forward the work to electrify the hall. Our approach secures the future of the building in the medium term, as well as supporting the desire of our community of all ages and the priorities of East Cambs District Council in combating climate change. In short, our project will deliver measurable benefits in a short timescale. I would also like to raise one specific matter for consideration by the officers and the committee on future funding opportunities. It's a given that public bodies have to deliver value for money, and invariably part of this is a consideration of the number of people who will be impacted by projects and grant funding. Unfortunately, this can work against smaller communities such as Little Thetford with a relatively small population, but where infrastructure such as a village hall still has the same operating costs with little access to internal funding streams. To put it into perspective, our grant application today is nearly 4 times the value of the annual precept apportioned to the parish council. We accept that officers and councillors will never satisfy everyone in their decision making, but perhaps a mechanism could be found so that smaller communities are not disproportionately disadvantaged. In conclusion, the trustees of Little Thetford Village Hall hope that the committee will support the proposal from the officers to make additional funding available and thereby support our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Members, clearly we will raise these issues during debate on the agenda item, so we'll get back to you after that. Thank you. And the second question is from, we think it's from Mr. Stewart. Is Mr. Stewart here? Mr. Stewart, would you like to come up to the table, please, and read your question? Yeah. Sorry, could you turn your microphone on?
That one?
That's it.
We good?
That's good.
I'm not sure you will have answers to them because we in Stretham don't have answers to most of the questions, but the county council removed their grant funding for the project in Stretham that's proposed for 1.45 million of funding. The county council removed 500,000 of funding due to lack of consultation of the residents. Do you know if there's been any further consultation of the residents carried out since losing the funding? Have Stretham Parish Council made that clear? The only quantity surveyor reports completed for Stretham Parish Council to date show the cost to be 50% higher than stated in the funding application. The 750,000 funding that we currently claim to have, I do not believe we do have. I don't believe there is any business plan or feasibility study. So I don't see how we as a council are going to continue to run the centre without drastically raising the precept to cover the currently unknown running costs of this centre. Has the amount of spending on designs and plans on behalf of the SWCLT been calculated? So far, Stretham Parish Council has paid all the planning applications, all the fees, and all the design costs, and it has included buildings for the SWCLT. We're yet to find out whether we are going to calculate that and whether that will be paid back to the Parish Council and back to the public purse. I believe we plan to pay out of the 2.35 million that's stated in that paperwork. It must include all of the fees for building, all of the drainage and all of the external works, which again will all be done on behalf of the SWCLT. I don't know whether that is planned to be paid back to the Parish Council, but from the paperwork, it seems not. And East Cambs District Council granted planning permission at Manor Farm to the Land Trust on the basis of providing a doctor's surgery to the residents. Do you feel it's now right this is paid for with public money from Stretham Parish Council?
Thank you, Mr. James. Sorry, Mr. Stewart. And thank you for your questions. Clearly, these need to be considered during the debate on the item, rather than me preempting that debate. Thank you. Brings us to the end of public questions, I believe. Right, we move on to agenda item number 2, which is apologies and substitutions. Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Bill Hunt and Councillor David Ambrose Smith is here as substitute, and from Councillor Alison Whelan and Councillor Gareth Wilson is here as substitute.
Thank you, Tracy. Welcome both. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare for any items on the agenda? Councillor Bailey first.
Yeah, just as previously, just to note that I'm a trustee of East Cambs CLT in relation to item 12, but I intend to remain in the room and take full part.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, agenda item 7, 2.12, items G and H, Saltown Rangers Football Club and Social Club, and the Isleham Community Association. I'm a director of both organisations, and therefore I won't be taking part in the debate and will leave the room because I believe that I've got a prejudicial interest.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. Brings us on to agenda item 4, the minutes, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 4th of October 2022. And my thanks to Councillor Foggington for chairing that meeting in my absence. Does any member wish to raise any points of accuracy with any of the minutes? If not, could I have a proposer and seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foggington. Thank you, Councillor Hopper. I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Item 5 is Chairman's announcements. Just have a couple of announcements to make today. As per usual, I've invited John Hill, Managing Director, and Nigel Ankers, Finance Manager at East Cambs Trading Company, to attend and contribute to relevant items on the agenda. In particular, to facilitate John Hill's presence, I'm going to vary the agenda running order to take item 12 next. And secondly, I would like to welcome Hannah Walker, who is sitting, that's it, and give everybody a wave, sitting with us here today. Hannah's our new trainee Democratic Services Officer, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more of Hannah at these meetings, and welcome. Brings us on to agenda item 12, which I remind members is for noting, ECTC half-yearly update. And can I ask Emma Grimmer to introduce the item?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to remind members that I'll be speaking in my capacity as ECTC Director of Property and Commercial. So it wasn't that long ago we sat here presenting to you the full business plan for this year, and now we're presenting to you the half-year report, as we've promised to do through the shareholder agreement. So what I intend to do is just give you a very quick update where we are, then I'll hand over to Nigel for the numbers, and then we'll take questions if there are any. So the first part of the half-year update focuses on our strategic risk management. We now take this strategic risk management plan to every board meeting, and board members are updated on the risks. Since you last saw it, there are some changes to that risk management plan. The first being that it's been changed to reflect the new loan facility of 7.5 million. And to confirm that the debenture agreements that we agreed to enter into have now been done and registered with Companies House. And then you'll see the additional risk at risk 10, which covers off the cost of living risk for the company. So we're not currently experiencing a huge impact of the cost of living crisis in terms of sales completions, but we are keeping that closely monitored, and will continue to keep that monitored and bring it to board as soon as any significant event occurs. I don't intend to go through the risk register, but happy to take questions. Moving on to progress against the business plan for this year. Two key notes for ED markets and ground maintenance. Nigel will go through the numbers in detail at a high level shortly, but both for ED markets, you'll see that there's an increased salary cost lines, and this is to reflect both the increase of resources that we committed at the beginning of the year to deal with the additional markets that we've been doing, and also the impact of the cost of living increase. And for grounds maintenance, likewise, there's the salary increase line, and this is to do with the cost of living increase that was awarded recently. On the property, we've got 2 sites which are in progress at the moment, and we're coming to the end of those sites. We've got West End Gardens in Hadnam, which, all being well, will complete later on this year into early next year. We've got the CLT property, the final CLT property is transferring, I believe, in December, Nigel. Yeah, and then we've got the MOD, what we call phase 1 refurb. That's also coming to an end, with 10 properties left to sell, and the final 4 going over to the CLT by January. The other noticeable updates for the work in progress on MOD phase 2, the planning committee has granted, subject to the completion of section 106, the new scheme for 27 units, and that will come to board with a full business plan later on. And we're working on getting above the policy threshold, policy requirement for the affordable housing delivery. And on the former Paradise Pool site, recently the company's been approved some minor amendments to deal with some space standards within the site. And I'm in the process of building up the final business case for review and approval by the board, which is anticipated in December consideration. So I'll hand over to Nigel for the numbers. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Looking at the financial table on page 11, turnover, the commercial services team broadly the same as last year. The property revenues jumped from 15.5 million to 31.5 million. That's off the back of selling 92 properties this year compared with just 37 last year. Cost-wise, Emma touched on the pressure on salaries in the commercial area. Property costs will be higher as a result of the number of properties that we're going to sell. So after that, we're left with a EBITDA for this year of 2.1 million and a profit before tax after interest of 480,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Members, any comments, questions, either to officers or to our guests? If not, are we happy to note the report? Oh, sorry, Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Could I just ask about the house sales? I believe a number of properties have been put back onto the market recently. And that doesn't sound good. They're being re-advertised at a lower price, I believe. The risk register says that the market remains strong for the foreseeable future, but that's not all the vibes coming out of a lot of other areas of the market. And we were being told last time that the company was making ongoing losses. So could you tie all of those together and tell us a little bit about the impact of the turmoil, the reason for properties being reduced in price and put back on the market, how that ties in with the risk register and the statement about ongoing losses at the last meeting, and how that all affects the loan repayment?
Yes, so for the first, we relisting properties back on the open market, we have experienced, not because of the cost of living, but for other circumstances where buyers have had to pull out for various reasons, whether not directly from them, but from where the chain may break later on. They've gone in at a lower price, but it's still within the business plan allowance that we put through, so it doesn't impact the business plan that we've put forward. And then, which is why it's not reflected as the risk at the moment, because it's still within those thresholds that we'd allow for. So we're still confident of the loan repayment as stated for the CPCA loans of the 31st of March 2020. As confident as can be sat here today. We are confident that we will be making those repayments by the 31st of March 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Councillor Harris.
Just want to build on that and go back to the risk register for a moment. The advice that we are hearing from the market is that we should expect a reduction in house prices generally across the country of about 10% by this time next year, which is obviously speculative. But what I don't see in the risk register is, first of all, any tracking of mortgages. That the rise in mortgage payments is not a specific risk item here. You talk about looking at the market, obviously we would expect that. But if the worst case actually happens here, then by my calculations, that wipes out the profit completely. So I would just like to know if you are scrutinizing the level of mortgages with care, and whether you can report more regularly to us about the fluctuations that you're seeing, because this would appear to be a major risk item that should be given a space of its own, I would think.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll consider separately whether or not more frequent reporting needs to occur to committee. But in terms of how we're monitoring the risk, I can assure you that as a management team, we come together very frequently, as recently as yesterday, to discuss, particularly on the mortgage rate increase, but where we've already got sales secured, then it's not an issue for us, because everybody has mortgage offers that expire at further dates. So it is something that we continue to monitor and track and see if it will have an impact. What we're finding is that, yes, there's been a slowdown, but the interest level is still high for the properties that we still have on the market. But it is actively monitored through the management team, so through the sales manager, through myself, through Nigel on the numbers. How does this impact the business plan? Does a drop in sale, does that impact the assumptions made in the business plan? So those conversations are always ongoing, and we do maintain spreadsheets for ourselves to ensure that we're tracking that back properly. Thank you.
Briefly.
Obviously, yes, briefly. My concern here is that we are effectively the shareholder committee. So we are your shareholders for all operational purposes. I no doubt that, being prudent people, you would be keeping an eye on this. Of course you will. I simply want to be absolutely sure that reporting will be timely and detailed and will focus on the key issues into this committee in future. That's all. And I'm sure we can take that as a yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Trapp.
Just one quick.
Could you turn your microphone on, please?
So sorry, I normally leave it on anyway, so this is a different thing. On page 10, for the West End Gardens, Haddenham, it actually says there's 41 build completes mid-year. How near are we to actually completing those?
We should be build complete on all of the properties by late December, early January.
Okay, so
So that, sorry, so that 41 would then become 54, sorry.
but then you're thinking that they're all going to be sold, even 3 months for selling?
They're already sold, already reserved. The sales completion will happen back to back with the build completion, as opposed to having to sell them.
Right, thank you. So we happy to note the report? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Members, we now move to items for decision. And agenda item 6 is the Biodiversity Net Gain paper. That's Richard Kay to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm genuinely really pleased to present this report today. I've prepared many plans and strategies over the past 20 years in local government, and many of them are statutory, complex, long in the making. But I genuinely believe these two documents recommended for approval today, as combined, are potentially the most influential documents I've ever presented to a committee. And to help you decide whether to approve them or not, I'd like to explain a little bit more why I consider them so important. Yes, my planning policy documents, which you're probably more familiar with me presenting, such as a local plan, are clearly important, clearly influence considerably how development takes place in an area. But essentially, those sort of documents are around rolling forward procedures, tinkering at the edges how we do things, allocating some more land here and there for housing, etc. Important, yes, absolutely, they are important documents, but they're essentially carrying on what we've done in the past, trying to improve a few things as we go along, but essentially the message is clear. It's about keep on building, let's keep on growing, let's try and create good communities. But these documents today are different, I believe. They start to address for the first time what I believe is a fundamental flaw of humans, and that flaw is we're just too clever for our own good. We're too good at exploiting resources around us in our desire to control our environment, provide wealth, provide materials for our consumption. And in exploiting those resources, humans are in effect destroying the very planet that sustains us. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, this summer described it as collective suicide, that we are digging our own graves and that humanity is treating nature like a toilet. A few facts. Human activity has altered 75% of the Earth's surface. In East Cambridgeshire, it's probably more like 100%. 1 million animal and plant species are threatened with extinction. In East Cambridgeshire, unfortunately, we're one of the least biodiverse areas in the country. Today, humans and their domesticated animals account for 96% of global mammal biomass. Just 4% is reserved for wild animals. The biomass of poultry is 3 times greater than that of all wild birds combined. Bringing these sort of statistics together, in the last 40 years, 2/3 of all biodiversity populations have been lost. That's 2/3. We've only 1/3 left. And forgive me if there are 1 or 2 people in this room under 40, but for the vast majority of us, in less than our lifetime, we've lost 2/3 of life on Earth. But there is hope, and this is where I'm becoming more positive. I genuinely have hope. We are, after all, a part of nature, not apart from nature. And I, and others far more qualified than I to speak on the subject, firmly believe that nature has the ability to heal itself if only we let nature back in. And that is what these documents are trying to do. Show us as humans where the doors are, encourage them to be opened and let nature back in. So turning to hope, what do these documents actually do? The first, the Nature Recovery Network for East Cambridge, provides for the first time ever a framework of where we need to focus our efforts and how to focus our efforts. It's not a document with fluffy words saying we must plant more trees or dig more ponds. It's a document that identifies specific geographical areas in East Cambridgeshire with the greatest opportunity for biodiversity gain and sets out the specific type of gain that we should be seeking here in East Cambridgeshire. That could be tree planting in some areas, but in other areas that'd be wrong. Wetland creation or grassland meadows or different types of farming would be of greatest benefit in parts of a district. And that's what the document outlines. The second document about biodiversity net gain supports the former. It's a sort of daughter document, if you like. It explains how we can use a planning system to further biodiversity gains in our area, directly linking to the Nature Recovery Network document. The Biodiversity Net Gain document will undoubtedly evolve over the years as the procedures and practices improve. But I have confidence, as well as hope, that new development can and will, in the future, actually be a force for good, for biodiversity good in East Cambridgeshire. So that second document, the Biodiversity Net Gain document, is an important start, but it's nothing more than that. There's still a long journey to go before the development industry genuinely embeds biodiversity gain into their thinking. But we're here to help them. This document's here to help them. And if necessary, we're here to enforce. But it is the Nature Recovery Network document that is more fundamental. This is a framework for change that should start to establish what our district will look like, how it will thrive, how humans will coexist with biodiversity in our landscape, a landscape which is both productive for human benefit, but enriched with biodiversity. It's a framework, I believe, that in 50, 100, perhaps even 500 years' time could be identified as the starting point of reversing the decline in biodiversity here in East Cambridgeshire. I wish to thank the local Wildlife Trust for their hard work in preparing the document and their commitment to continue working with us and other partners in our local area. And can I also thank wider officers of this council that helped with the biodiversity gain document, especially those that contributed some of the photographs. And it's clear we've got officers right across the council who really love nature, committed to help, even if it's not their day job. So to conclude, I recommend that this committee acknowledges that biodiversity crisis we face, endorses the two documents presented to you, and in doing so, triggers the start of the monumental task of reversing the decline in nature right here in East Cambridgeshire, and in time, help create a biodiverse, rich, working and productive landscape for the benefit of everyone, for people, for nature, forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'm more than happy to propose from the chair the recommendations before us. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Bailey. Members, any comments or questions for Richard? Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's probably the most passionate introduction to anything I've heard in this room. So thank you for that. And it's rightly passionate as well. And it's good to see the level of detail in this and to see the amount of work that's being done by people you mentioned. I've got a few questions. The first one is that the minimum requirement is 10%, and that's what we're aiming for in this document. Is there any sense of a further aim to go above the minimum, and how much and by when, and how would that look different from what we have in front of us, is my first question. My second question is specifically around the Soham grasslands at 3.8 and the intensity of housing development in Soham and the extent to which it's possible to preserve and protect the Soham grasslands and commons in the face of that development. The third thing is very much to welcome on page 49 of the document, the emphasis on individual and community action. And I'm really pleased to see that in there. There's a lot of individual action that can be taken. And I'm always aghast when I walk up to the front doors of properties that have sort of astroturf gardens and the proliferation of hard surfacing and all of that seems to be happening so much in our communities, which is a real issue. But also I'm very keen to see parishes getting together and producing documents, producing plans for biodiversity, but also for climate change. There's a good model there with the neighbourhood planning system, and it would be really good to see that sort of collective work happening at parish and community level, both on climate change and also on biodiversity, and I'm very keen to see that happen. And my fourth and final question is about the status of the very beautiful colour document that we've got here, the Biodiversity Net Gain interim guidance. You're very clear in your report that it's not a planning document. Is there any intention to be able to codify it into something like an SPD that would sit alongside planning documents or local plans or whatever? And could you explain exactly what its status is and how much regard is required to be had to it by developers, applicants, and so on? Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. So I'll take those in the order you gave me. The 10% rule. So the 10% rule is set out in the Environment Act as the minimum that it's not fully mandated yet, but the expectation it would be by next autumn. There is some slight uncertainty out there, but there's a general expectation that a local area can mandate a higher figure should it choose to do so, but only do so. The only way you can do so would be through a local plan. There would be no other way you could do it. So that would have to be a policy within your updated local plan, which said you wanted to achieve 20% or whatever figure you came up with, and you'd have to justify that through the usual testing process. Clearly, there's nothing to stop a developer going above 10%, but in terms of enforcing it, the only percent we could apply, unless you updated your local plan, would be that figure. So that's the mechanism for that figure. The sown grasslands, I can't comment specifically on individual planning applications and the impact generally of growth around sown. What I can say though is it's an issue I recognise, and our recently employed new climate change and natural environment officer who started with the council a month or 6 weeks ago or something like that. Part of her role in her job description is actually as the Stretham Commons officer, and part of that is looking generally and working with people of Stretham and the landowners and the parish council, etc., looking at how we can put in place a framework for managing those grasslands and the commons in a better way than we perhaps have in the past. So we're onto it, but I can't give you an exact answer of how we're going to do it and whatever, but we're certainly aware of the issue you raised. The third one, I didn't quite catch what the actual question was, but I can say that we are working with Natural Cambridgeshire, which is the local nature partnership for the area, on both encouraging but also establishing templates for parish-based local nature recovery plans. Now, clearly it'd be up to each parish whether they do one or not and what they want to put in that or not, but it's certainly something on our radar to help encourage them to do so. And sits alongside the other one we're trying to encourage, which is around a more wider climate action plan and their carbon footprint, etc. Separate to that is neighbour plans, should they choose to do so, a bit more onerous for those places to do it, but I know lots of parishes are interested in it. And again, that's where we can support them in policies should they wish to do so. The final question was around the status of the BNG document, which, as you pointed out, was clear that it doesn't in any way supersede policy because it'd be unlawful to attempt to do so. What we already have in a supplementary planning document of about, I'm guessing 18 months ago, something like that, is called the Natural Environment SPD, I think it's called. That already has a policy about BNG, biodiversity net gain, in there. And so that establishes the policy framework that we can apply now prior to BNG becoming mandatory by the Environment Act in 12 months' time. What the purpose of this document is trying to do is not trying to set new policy, it's trying to explain in a bit more layman's terms how we're actually going to implement what we've already got. So in that respect, it doesn't really have status in itself, as in it's not an enforceable tool. It's not saying you must do something. It's a way of saying this is how we are going to operate as a district council to implement our existing policy. And this is what we want you as developers to do in order. And if you do it this way, you will meet the policy we've already set. And so it's an encouraging policy set within the framework that already exists, both local framework in our SPD and our local plan, and then emerging regulatory requirements and act and the Environment Act and what that's saying. That's where it's trying to pitch itself as a way of making sure we implement what already exists to as far as we possibly can. As I say, without if we wanted to go further, that would have to be via a local plan mechanism. So I think that was your 4 questions. If I missed anything, do let me know. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Harries.
Just one observation to begin with. I mean, first of all, this is a well-written document. I think you're a very good officer, and I instinctively trust what you say. So I think you're absolutely doing the right thing within these limitations, and I completely applaud that. And of course, it's a no-brainer. We're going to accept this and do everything we can to promote it. But I think you in your previous answer have just touched on some of the issues here. And what caught my eye was paragraph 3.19, which is the system of 10%, minimum 10% bio net gain for a development, which, if you forgive me, I'm completely skeptical about. I do not see exactly how this is going to be enforced or how it's going to be measured. You know, in another part of my life, I look at carbon trading as an issue, and I see some of the same problems here. You know, you need a system. You know there's going to be development. You can't stop there being development, and you want developers to pay in kind by trying to do the right thing for nature. The devil is in that detail and in the enforcement. Now, you've just said something very interesting, which is that you can only really enforce within the context of a local plan. So it seems to me that the takeout that I have from this is that it's probably time for us now to wrap all of these considerations together in a local plan that puts biodiversity front and center of everything that we do, because development is going on. People are struggling to preserve scraps of green space, and to be told by consultants that we are going to end up with net gain, I find it hard to believe. So I'd just like to know that we're going to push this and try to put it on a mandatory basis with real enforcement, real policing, and hard discussions with developers from now on. So you rightly say this whole county is one of the worst places for biodiversity in the whole country. And this country,
can you come to the question?
Yeah, I'm going to shut up right there, because otherwise you're going to get a kind of speech that nobody needs to hear. So sorry about that. Good luck to you, Richard.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chairman. Question to you, Richard. I've got 2 questions. You mentioned the new environmental officer coming in, and I really sat upright at the mention of her work that is planned around the Salem grasslands. Could you have a word and get him to speak to the local members, please? I can ask that as a blatant request. We live there, we know it, we speak to the people day in, day out, think we can help. Okay, so to have not heard is a little bit embarrassing. Well, the principle's still there. But my actual question to you is reading And I share the views of the two councillors opposite. It's a real pleasure to see your passion coming through in this document, both written and verbal. But a passion of ours in the area that I live in at the moment is something called Sonica. And the question I'd like to ask you is that would a yes to Sonica cause a rewrite to both of these documents?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, Chairman. That's probably
well. Okay, let me hone that in for you a little bit, Richard, if I can. 3.5 Newmarket chalk grasslands impacted by Sonica, yes. Yeah. 3.6 Chippenham Fen and River Snail impacted by Sonica, yes. 3.7 Breckland Edge, yes. 3.8 no, some grasslands probably not. But there's enough of that. This is a splendid, well written. Well spoken about a set of documents, and I applaud you for it. What I'm saying is we're on the precipice of a very, very big impacting decision. And I know members opposite have stood alongside us in this. I'm just worried for you that an awful lot of this, particularly the wildlife side of things, could be taken care of in a decision early next year.
I think that's. Sorry, that was more points for the debate than a straight question to Richard, to be fair, I think, from the chair. Richard, did you actually want to answer? No. Councillor Trapp.
Just following on from Councillor Goldsack, saying perhaps one ought to consider what the effect of the will be on solar farms. Is there more biodiversity because there's lots of ground we don't know, do we? And it's a pity this document doesn't actually have that, because that is an impact.
Chair, it's probably a general comment. I don't want to talk about a specific planning application. That's not appropriate for me to do so. But I would say that all development is subject to the biodiversity net gain requirements, and therefore, in scrutinising whether it's Sonica or any other solar panels, that falls under the same legislative framework. So it's not for me as decision maker on those applications whether they've done that job or not, but the decision maker who does make a decision on those applications are duty bound to consider biodiversity net gain as part of those proposals. So that's probably as much as I can say.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
So I think it's slightly unfortunate you have page 15 the red kite. Those people I know who live in red kite areas find them dreadful. It is not something, I mean, they're lovely to look at, but they multiply and they create problems. Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure that was a question. Right. We've had a proposal and seconder. We now move to the debate, I think. There was no further questions for Richard. No, right. We now move to the debate. Councillor Bailey.
Well, if anyone else is going for, I'm seconder, so I'll come in at the end if anyone wants to go first.
Councillor Hopper.
I'm shocked about your red kite remark. I walk up on the Newmarket Heath daily, and one of the joys is watching the red kites. Absolute joys. I just love it. It's the first just throwaway remark. This is a wonderful document. It made me smile because it's actually addressing what we need to address in this area, and to discover that we have officers of such extraordinary photographic talent. The pictures are the one of the robin, the young robin, the juvenile robin. Just, I thought that ought to be on a Christmas card, blown up into a poster. It is stunning. You could pass on my thanks and my praise to the officers because they are stunning, and this has my full support. Obviously, with what we're trying to do with our biodiversity and reducing our carbon footprint, this all marries together. And as far as Sonica is concerned, they talk about biodiversity corridors, which to me is something I don't understand. Nature cannot be harnessed or should not be harnessed or governed. And nature that has to exist under solar panels is not biodiversity or nature that I recognize. Animals need to be able to roam, birds need to be able to fly, plants need to be able to grow without having to do it behind fences and under 1 million solar panels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Sorry, read this document several times now, and I like it more every time I read it. Richard, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for your expertise and your passion. I know this is something that's really close to your heart and matters to you a lot, and I think it's, you know, it's a massive wake-up call for this country and our county, and it's really good to see that, you know, I see this as a very supportive and enabling document. And we should be encouraging people who are carrying out development in East Cambs over the next 12 months to be absolutely embracing this, because, you know, I think developers that embrace this agenda will have a much more attractive development at the end from having harnessed what this document tries to help them to do. And I think getting people ready to do this in advance of it becoming a legislative requirement that they cannot possibly get out of, and we're not allowed to let them get out of, it places it on a level of importance, as I understand it, like building regulations, for example. You know, it's something that has to happen, and you have to be able to evidence it, and it has to be signed off, and it will be very, very, you know, fully enforced. So I think this places biodiversity net gain at an appropriate level, finally. You know, we've got a number of important sites across East Cambs and opportunities where things can be done to improve the lot. You know, I find it absolutely shocking. I'm 51, but I find it shocking that house sparrows are on the red list. I mean, how on earth did we get here? How did that happen in this country? It's absolutely terrible, and we have to make this change. And I find it a very accessible document, particularly the second one. I think it's really quick and easy to absorb and understand and get to grips with what it's about. And I think it'll be really good for all our communities as well, as, you know, people who are carrying out development. Richard and I had a meeting with some others with Natural Cambridgeshire recently around the doubling nature work, and they are bringing two really exciting projects, landscape scale type projects to Cambridgeshire, but also these community scale projects that Richard was alluding to. So I think there's big opportunities there for local community projects, which is brilliant. I mean, there is huge pressure on our land in this county. You know, there's pressure for food production, and I am very concerned, and I've been pushing like mad nationally that there should be, you know, protection of food land and some sort of public national strategy around food production. You know, there's built development and there's nature, and finally nature's getting a bit of a look in. You know, it's probably, you know, not as far as it could go, but it's something, and at least it will be put on a legislative footing. So I think it's brilliant. And I would just remind all members around the table that we have our own fantastic nature recovery site that happened, you know, not by design, because we left it alone. And that site is the former Meeple Outdoor Centre, where nature is absolutely thriving, and we have nationally important species, and in fact internationally important species on that site, because people left it alone and left it to get on with it. And we've got to look after that site and the nature that is thriving and existing on that site, and that's really important, as are many other sites. So thank you, and I hugely support this, and how lucky are we to have such a brilliant officer with such passion.
thank you, Richard. As the proposer, I don't think I can do more than echo the comments that have already been made. Members, we have the recommendations in front of us. Are we all in favour, or do we need to go to a vote? All in favour. Thank you very much. That brings us on to agenda. Thank you, Richard. Brings us on to agenda item number 7, the growth and infrastructure scoring panel recommendations. Can I ask Sally Bonnet to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. The Growth and Infrastructure Fund was approved by this committee at its meeting in June. The scoring panel met to assess the applications, and details of these meetings can be found at Appendix 1. Details of the 9 eligible projects and the scores awarded can be found at Appendix 2. Having considered the applications, the recommendation from the panel was to request that the committee increases the amount of Cambs Horizons funding available to just over £2.3 million to enable all of the projects to be funded. As noted in the report, since the application was submitted and scored by the panel, a parish poll has been held in Stretham. Following this, I received an update from Stretham Parish Council, which has been circulated to you all so that the latest information is available to members to inform your decision. I would just like to remind members that this scheme would operate as per the SIL whereby we would have a funding agreement in place which sets out the conditions of funding and milestones at which money would be paid over to the applicants. The funding is paid upon receipt of invoices demonstrating that eligible work has been undertaken. Chair.
Thank you, Sally. Can I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Councillor Bailey, seconder.
Have to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. Members, questions to Sally in the first instance? Yeah, no, Councillor. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. There were a number of questions relating to the scheme from members of the public, and I was wanting to know when those were going to be answered.
I think most of them, for consideration during our debate.
Sorry, Chair, but they are questions that require answers. Yeah. A member of the public asks, a member of the public asks a question and therefore expects an answer, surely.
Right. Do you want to deal with those now then, Sam?
Do you want me to read each question out?
I think it'd be helpful for anybody watching.
Yep. So question 1, the County Council removed their grant due to lack of consultation on residents. Has there been any further consultation carried out since losing this? Not that I'm aware of. Question 2, the only quantity surveyor reports completed for SPC, Stretham Parish Council, to date show costs to be 50% higher than stated in the funding application. How can you be sure that the £2.3 million is correct? I haven't seen the quantity surveyor report, so I can't comment on that. Have SPC shown proof of the 750k funding they claim to currently have? That's addressed in the letter from Stretham Parish Council. Is there a business feasibility plan? Can you be sure the council can complete this project using public money and continue to run the centre without drastically raising the precept to cover the currently unknown running costs? That's a matter for Stretham Parish Council. Has the amount of spending on designs and plans on behalf of the SWCLT, Swaffham Wilburton Community Land Trust, been calculated yet? And will the SWCLT reimburse the public money Stretham Parish Council has spent on their behalf, the designs and plans of their business units? Again, that's a matter for Stretham Parish Council. Are you aware Stretham Parish Council plan to pay with public money for all the building and legal fees, drainage and external works on behalf of SWCLT for their business units? Again, that's a matter for Stretham Parish Council. And then finally, ECDC, East Cambs District Council, granted planning permission for at Manor Farm for SWCLT on the basis of providing a doctor's surgery to the residents. Is it right that this is now paid for with money from Stretham Parish Council instead? So the section 106 doesn't actually stipulate how the building would be paid for, and it was always envisaged that there would be an element of public funding towards that.
Thanks, Sally. Councillor Harris.
Sally, you said that the issue of public funding had been covered in this letter which I've read. Now, this letter from the Stretham Parish Council chair contradicts what is in the papers. The papers say that the council has secured funds. This says the council has been in discussions and believes it probably will secure funds. This is incompatible, so you need to strike out. Now, admittedly, I'm sorry, it's actually in item 8, but you need to amend that now because this is false and misleading. I mean, we'll deal with that in depth when we come to agenda item 8.
Yeah.
But you said it's dealt with. Yes, it's dealt with by contradicting what's in the papers. That's how it's dealt with. So how come this statement is still in the papers?
Can we cover?
When you received this letter, you should have rewritten it.
That is in the papers for item 8, so we'll cover that off on item.
Sorry?
That is in the papers for item 8.
Yes.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. It's just that this was mentioned in the answer to the questions, and that neatly segued on to the next item. Yes, we'll deal with that, but you can't simply answer a question by saying, oh, well, we have a written response on that, when that written response contradicts what's in the papers. You need to acknowledge that there's a problem there, even if we're then going to deal with it in the next agenda item. That's all I'm saying.
Noted. Is there any questions for Sally? Councillor Dupre?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation 1 at 2.1 is to increase the growth and infrastructure fund from the allocated 2 million to up to £2,307,216. Where is that extra £307,216 coming from? The report doesn't say, and normally when we're being asked to move £250,000 around, there's some indication of where it's coming from.
So under,
I was going to say, it's actually covered in 5.1, Councillor Dupre.
How much Horizons money is there in total?
Sorry, just to answer the direct question through you, Chair, the original Cambs Horizons that we managed to secure was 2.8 million. So we've taken draws from that from the feasibility study for the cycleway, for example. There was a decision to allocate 2 million of that to this, and there is sufficient headroom within that money to then top up that allocation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions to Sally? Right, we have in front of us an amendment to the recommendation.
So, sorry, Chair, could I speak speak as proposer of the main item first, before we deal with the recommendation? I thought I'd just moved the proposal. I thought, do I not get the opportunity to speak first? Amendment first.
Amendment, okay. Amendment first is my understanding. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Our amendment, which I'm putting forward and Councillor Harries is seconding, is to add a new item 3 and in the recommendations and renumber the current recommendation 3 as little 4. And our amendment is to add, in view of the result of the parish poll held in Stretham, calling for the delay of all further activity and spending until after the parish council elections in May 2023, no funding for the Stretham Hub should be paid over prior to those elections and subsequent review by the parish council of the proposals. The reason for this is, I think, self-evident in the questions from the public and also the answers given to the questions from the public, so many of which were, that's a matter for Stretham Parish Council. And my concern is that since these papers were, I assume, written, although I think they were published after the result of the poll, the result of the poll conducted of residents, which I think the turnout was something similar to the kind of turnout that has put all of us in our seats here today. So it's not just a handful of people. The parish poll was very clear by a majority of 2 to 1 that the community of Stretham wished to put a very big pause on this project until after those elections. To therefore grant huge sums of money comparatively for the size of authority we are to, in this item and the next item, to a project where 2/3 of the residents who expressed a view said that they wanted a delay and a rethink, and by inference that they are not convinced that the parish council is hearing the views of residents on this. To press ahead in those circumstances seems to me to be a massive disregard of public opinion and the views of residents in the area, which is to be one of the beneficiaries of this sum of money. The aim of the amendment is not simply to delete that sum from the allocation approved for the funding project that item 2. It doesn't delete it. It simply says, in line with the views, the expressed views of the public democratically through a properly conducted parish poll, the money should be set aside and not paid over until we are absolutely confident that this is what the parish wants and that the parish council is listening to what the residents of the parish want. And I'm extremely concerned that the letter that has come round from the chair of the parish council indicates that they are minded to completely disregard the parish poll and its very clear majority and go ahead anyway. I don't think that we can go ahead. It would be a betrayal of our duty to the money, firstly, but also to the people of Stretham. It would be a betrayal to go ahead with allocating funding to a project where so many, such a majority of residents who have expressed a view in that poll, do not want this to go ahead until this is resolved. So many answers were, it's up to the parish council. It seems to me that had the residents of Stretham having said, we want to wait and see what our new parish council thinks about this, that we need to take that very seriously on board, which is why we are asking that no money should be paid over until that election has happened and until the new parish council has had a chance to review what's on the table. Thank you.
Councillor Harris, are you observing your right, or?
I guess that's what I'm going to do, yes.
I thought it might be. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm rather surprised at Councillor du Preez's, well, I'm not surprised at what she said, because I know her position on this situation because I watched her very carefully at the County Council meeting where the funding was withdrawn, not from other projects, but from Stretham Hub. So she comes here with quite a position on this situation already. So it hasn't surprised me at all to hear what she said. I recently had the very great pleasure of visiting the new Littleport Youth and Community Hub, which is well under the way and nearly complete. It's a project that's also benefiting from funding from this council. And the value that comes from the Littleport project is far, far greater than just the building. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's about galvanising a community, providing a focus for activity in a place which outreach and support work can flourish. The building is the bricks and mortar manifestation of the spirit that exists in Littleport to pull together to improve its lot and provide new support and services to a community. It is an absolutely fantastic facility. It's a hub, it's a true hub. All the project funding that we are talking about today is very strictly controlled and it's subject to conditions. It can only be spent on capital items. It can only be drawn down when all relevant permissions are in place, including planning permission where that's applicable. And the funding is only actually provided on receipt of invoices. Now, Stretham Parish Council, democratically elected organisation, they've submitted a funding request. The request has met all the criteria. They've provided all the correct evidence. Funding from this authority, can, if Stretham Parish Council chooses to do so, facilitate delivery of a new community hub and GP consulting rooms. Those are referred to in their plans as phases 1 and 3 of the project, just for anybody that's following it closely. This project was discussed at great length at what was a cross-party scoring panel, and it scored highly in the panel. You can see the results of that scoring in the documents that we've got today. Now, I understand that the current GP surgery in Stretham is condemned. It can only be used to provide prescriptions. And I also understand that the GPs have confirmed that they're ready to go and that they, want and need to provide services from Stretham. I understand a Public Works Loan Board has been agreed in principle. This is all perfectly normal process. And I'd remind members that payment of funding will not take place unless and until all the funding to complete the project is in place. And I hope that provides some reassurance to some of the comments that have been made so far. So satisfactory evidence has already been provided of the other sources of funding coming from the parish council, just like the other project applications. So, an eligible application has been submitted that's been scored very highly. I don't think it is the job of this authority or any higher authority to decide whether or not Stretham Parish Council should continue with the project. That is absolutely a matter for Stretham Parish Council. If funding is agreed today for this project, it's a matter for Stretham Parish Council to decide if and when to seek to draw down the funds. And it could choose to do that after the election. That is not to be imposed by this authority. That would be an outrage. You know, we are not here to tell democratically elected parish councils what they should do and when they should do it. They've satisfied all of the application criteria. They've scored highly. They've stated in their letter that their minded continue, but the timing of that is absolutely a matter for them. For my part, I sincerely hope that Stretham Parish Council will work to deliver this project. It's a fantastic and desperately needed new facility. It's viable, it's ready to go. If the committee agrees to fund it, the funding will be in place. And when it's built and when it throws open its doors for the first time, and when I see local people being able to see their GP in their own village, walking up there with their children in pushchairs and so on, I, for one, will be proud that of the small part that I played in helping to secure funds to make it happen. I wish them the very best, as I do with all the projects on this list. And it is not a matter for us to impose the will of this council on a democratically elected authority.
Councillor Hopper.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, of those that voted yes to suspend this, that represents 20% of the population of Stretham. There's 80% either said no or had no opinion. So that is not the majority of the village. I have been a parish councillor for 8 years and a district councillor for 7.5. And never, ever have I attempted to interfere in somebody else's ward in a parish council decision. I find this absolutely shocking. Well, I'd like to say I was surprised, but sadly, I'm not, because this is certain councillors' fetish. This is their fetish, and they should be ashamed of themselves. This GP surgery will be used by not only Stretham, but many surrounding villages. And we have no right to tell a democratically elected parish council how they run their parish or how they do things. This is a disgrace. And there's an awful lot of assumptions here that this parish council will be overturned and a whole new raft of parish councillors who will come in and do exactly what they want. You're making a lot of assumptions, Councillor Dupre and Councillor Harries. And be very careful. As far as I'm concerned, we support this. We support the community, 80% of whom haven't said yes to delay. 80% of them have said either no, we don't want it, or I have no opinion on it. So let's listen to the 80% and not the 20%.
I have to say that on that arithmetic, we would still be members of the European Union. It's daft.
If I could just do my bit now. I was going to say.
Sorry, Councillor Harris, because you seconded, so I need to look for other contributions before coming to you. Councillor Wilson.
I think the GP surgery at Stretham affects not only the people in Stretham, I think it will affect the people who live round about. And certainly when this was discussed earlier on, the people in Haddenham who actually provide the doctors were not at all keen to have the Stretham one take away the facilities in Haddenham. And I don't know exactly what is planned here. And so I can't be sure about this, but I know that at the time, the National Health overriding bodies weren't at all keen on this. So I think that we don't want to impose this thing on anybody. I can't see why we're so worried about delaying something for 5 or 6 months. It's not really a big deal. As you know, we're talking about, the money is still available. It's just it won't actually be spent before the elections actually happen. Because what is a parish poll? We don't have them very often, and 26 or so % of people actually voting is a big. Pardon? 29, sorry, is a big percentage of people voting, because it's very difficult to get people out voting when there's not a general election going on at the same time. So, and to say all the people who didn't vote actually are in favour of it is clear nonsense, as you really perfectly well know. So the voting system we have is such that people who don't vote, their vote isn't counted. It's not assumed that they vote one way or the other, because we don't know which way they would have voted if they actually bothered to turn out. I say it's pity that we don't get 100% voting. Pity we don't have compulsory voting in some ways. But I think waiting a few months is not going to really damage this problem at all. After all, it's been being discussed since the CLT was first set up, what, 6-7 years ago. So it's not a month or two isn't going to make any difference. So we just say, let's hold on for a bit. We're not saying it shouldn't happen, just saying, just hold on and wait.
Right, if I have something to contribute, because I'm very conscious that Mr. James raised a point earlier on when he spoke at public question time regarding the need for us to try to ensure that smaller communities are not disadvantaged when setting out funding rules. From the chair, I would hope we would all totally agree with that, and that we must design schemes that do not disproportionately disadvantage those in smaller communities. I just want to make sure we've got that in clear and recorded in the minutes. And thank you for raising it, Mr. James. Now, Councillor Harries.
Okay, so several points. First of all, the voting system. Grow up. Grow up. 65% of people voted against Brexit, but here we are. 55% of the votes cast were against the Conservative Party at the last election. And here we no, come on, you've had your go. I'm telling you that the vote,
right,
you took the initiative to attack people.
Right, enough. Can we stick with the item, please? You
specifically raised this point, and I'm just saying that under our current voting system, to get a parish poll with a 2 to 4 hour window with very little chance of communication, with 29.5% people voting and a 2-to-1 vote against, that is as good or better than most of us do in our wards. So using that as a reason for saying 80% of people are secretly in charge, it's counterintuitive, it's wrong. You should not do it. You raised it, it's a red herring, stop it.
Point of personal explanation, I did not say they were in charge. I just said only 20% of the population were in favour of a vote that had been manipulated from people outside.
And that is the second point. Now, this is the second time that you and your colleagues have specifically targeted people who did not live in a village with a charge of manipulation. I want it noted and minuted that I consider that to be a completely unwarranted smear. And people within the village will say, just as they did in Little Thetford on that famous occasion where you all queued up to attack me personally, these problems happen within the village because of lack of trust within the village. The village does not trust its parish council and it doesn't trust its district councillors. Because people like us are known to have an interest in CLTs, I field messages from people saying, we can't get anybody else to help, will you take a look? And what I do is take a look. I do not interfere. Every single thing, the person who asked the question is a member of the public who stood for election to the parish council and was resoundingly elected when a vacancy came up. His questions are his questions. I had no sight of those questions. Really, I just wanted again minuted. This is a deliberate smear, and it's a smear against the people of Stretham. You, Chair, said you don't want to see, and we all don't want to see, local villages disadvantaged. No, we do not. Our job is not to try and stop people having a beautiful spanking new centre. We're simply reflecting the fact that nobody knows how much it's going to cost. The sources of funding are obscure. The particular requirement laid down by the county council that there should be adequate consultation never happened. The reason why it was refused was because there was no consultation. This is the problem. This needs to be examined further. Otherwise, we're going to be voting £700,000, which is a lot of money last time I looked, for something that has big question marks over it. Those questions need to be resolved. And my final point, I want to take you to the letter from the chair of the parish council that begins, there has been much chatter about this in the village. My goodness me. Yes, there's been some chatter in the village. The village has been up in arms. And as far as the parish council is concerned, oh, the peasants are chattering. I'm on the side of the peasants in this. I don't want this council to be taking a decision that may not be safe as far as the local council, the parish council is concerned. And yeah, I know I'm getting angry about it. You know very well how to make me angry, and I think sometimes you do it deliberately. But this business, manipulation, do you think they're idiots? Do you think the people of Stretham are fools? Do you think they can't think for themselves? Do you think it takes, and you're nodding, minute that, do you think that they can't make their own plans and their own decisions unless some idiot agitator comes from the outside? It's not true. If you talked to the people, you know it's not true. I'd love to think that I can get people to do things just by telling them. I can't, never have been able to. I manipulate no one. I'll listen to people and give them little bits of advice as far as my limited abilities permit. But all the rest of it is their initiative. We do not need to vote this through right now. We need to put it on ice for 6 months until the next election happens. And if the parish council is re-elected, I will grovel and say, sorry for doubting you. But let's give the people a chance to speak in a proper poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Bailey.
I'm just a bit confused now. Councillor Harris said he wants to vote to not award the money and put the money on ice, but that's not what his amendment suggests.
I said, okay, excuse the colloquialism. And may I also, by the way, congratulate Councillor Bailey for the little bit of performance art we got. I love the idea of her standing there benevolently, watching people with their children skipping up the path to the nice new GP surgery. We'd all love to see that. I support the amendment as written. I would like to have this delayed, not rescinded, not crossed off the list, not taken away. We do not want to stop the people of Stretham getting the centre they need and deserve, but it needs to be on their terms, by proper consultation on figures that have been properly costed, properly scrutinised and made public. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey, as proposer of the original.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd forgotten I had another speaking right, so apologies for that. Councillor Harris says that nobody knows how much it will cost, but in fact, those people that attended the scoring panel meeting, we had detailed information around that. It is very clear. The information has been made available. The applicant has provided evidence as to where that funding is intended to come from. And, you know, many funding streams are not actually physically available to be drawn down until all the appropriate permissions, etc., are in place. That is completely normal. They've got an in-principle decision for a Public Works Loan Board. They've said where the other match funding is intended to come from. That is completely normal process and is the same as many other applications to this organisation. There is nothing peculiar about that. In terms of the consultation, I mean, there is a live consultation on this project as we speak, and I've taken the trouble to look at the live planning application and all of the comments. I've read every single comment on the planning application, and there are many supportive comments, and notably many of those comments come from organisations and clubs and societies that exist within Stretham that want to use this facility and are supportive, and they obviously represent larger numbers of people with their organisation. So there are many people who do want to see this facility, but you know, I just reiterate, that is not a matter for decision by this committee. This committee has received a legitimate funding request. They've provided all the evidence like all the other applicants, and it is not, in my view, for this council to try to take decisions on behalf of Stretham Parish Council about when or if it should start the project. That is a matter for Stretham Parish Council, and therefore I cannot support this amendment, and I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Members, we now go to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Those against?
Apologies. So the amendment is lost by 4 votes to 6.
Thank you, Tracy. So we now turn to the substantive recommendation as originally tabled. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm really, really pleased to propose this item because, last discussion aside, I think all members of the scoring panel were incredibly excited to see the projects that are coming forward through this fund. It's not very often as a councillor, particularly in recent years, that you get to sit and dish out large dollops of money. We are a small local authority with a net budget of about 10 or 11, 12 million pounds. And yet this is a significant amount of money that we've been able to make available. And I want to thank Emma Grimmer in particular, who sat beside me on many an occasion while we fought blooming hard to get this money for East Cambridgeshire. It required a lot of technical and legal expertise, and we really had to fight for it. It comes from money, historical money, that was given over from the government to Cambridgeshire to support growth in Cambridgeshire, to improve the economy of Cambridgeshire. And the vast majority of the many millions of pounds that had been spent from this fund had gone to benefit Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire, so the Greater Cambridge area. And myself and some colleagues put forward a lot of work to make sure that this money could come to our local area to be spent. So it is a huge pleasure to finally see it being allocated. And we were absolutely delighted on the scoring panel to see the quality of the bids from our communities, and what a massively exciting list of projects. I mean, honestly, I applaud Viva Charity in particular on its outstanding initiative. They've worked in such short order to get themselves a building, get it renovated, get it delivered, get it in there with a fantastic charity and community use. And now they're forging ahead to try and create the correct environment to actually start delivering apprenticeships for their own young people in their own community, and traineeships in the creative arts and the creative industries. I mean, I just find that so inspiring that the community has stepped up to do this for itself. And I'm hugely excited to support that through this fund. I'm delighted to support actual delivery of a cycle route instead of just a feasibility study or just a piece of paper about a cycle route. It's fantastic to stump up the cash for the actual delivery of the long fought for Soham to Wicken cycle path. And that cycle path, if we grant this today, can now actually go ahead and happen and open, and people can cycle and walk along it. It's brilliant. And the footbridge link over Burwell Lode between Wicken Fen and Bottisham, that will enhance that area as well. They fit very well together. That's the national cycle route, and it's going to make that cycle route accessible to a whole load of new people, because it's going to make it a fully accessible bridge. It's an expensive project, it's an expensive bridge, but I think it's worth every penny. And the new community hub, as we've recently discussed, with very badly needed GP consulting rooms. And we've got village hall expansions, refurbishments, new kitchens, commercial kitchens that are going to help community facilities be self-sustainable and be more financially self-sustaining. And green energy projects. We heard from Graham James earlier about the one in Little Thetford, new cemetery. What a massive list of projects, because other funding is coming in to support together with our funding to actually make these things happen. And this is what we promised people we would try and do. And this is us delivering it. And we did have, I want people to understand that we had a cross-party scoring panel who discussed each project. They turned up to a meeting and discussed each project in detail, and were all excited about all of the projects and strongly felt that all the projects merited support. And that is hence the recommendation from that cross-party working group to increase the fund. And by this relatively modest increase of, it's a lot of money, but 300,000, it means that, you know, if you cut it off without the 300,000, I think there's 5 projects that wouldn't get funded. Put the 300,000 in, every single project that came forward can receive funding. So it's not that anyone is missing out. There were some people who didn't make it through the gateway process and were not eligible for this fund, but we will do everything we can to support them to access other funds for their projects. So, you know, it was cross-party, and it was an agreed recommendation from the working group to go ahead with all the projects and to increase the fund to enable that to happen. And just a reminder, with regard to any of these funds that are provided, they are all contingent on all the other funding being secured, all appropriate permissions being in place, and only on production and receipt of invoices. So it is very carefully controlled, this funding, and will not be inappropriately spent. So I am absolutely chuffed to bits to finally be here today with all these brilliant community-driven projects in front of us, and I think it's fantastic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowley. Councillor Bovingdon, are you reserving your right?
I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Bailey's points there, but also just thank the scoring panel really on this to approve these things. I'm particularly delighted as Surham ward member to see Wicken and Surham finally joined, as at every parish council meeting. That is the question I'm asked time and time again. It would be great to actually see that happening. And once again, just like to say the work that Viva Arts particularly has done in Surham for the good of the community, and having had 2 children myself go through Viva, what a fantastic organisation. Happy to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. Members. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to return, I'm going to return to Stretham because I want to start by saying that there are some really good projects in here. There are some really good projects in here. And I hadn't envisaged, I think, that we were going to see a cemetery as part of a growth and infrastructure fund, but hey, it makes sense. But I'm returning to Stretham because it is the stone in the shoe of this whole thing, because of the way the project has been carried out. And we heard in the speech proposing this, that we were certain about where the match funding was coming from. And I want to come back and say, I don't think we are. We have heard from the chair of the parish council that the Public Works Loan Board has confirmed that the project meets the requisite criteria and in principle would support the application. However, the facts are somewhat different. The Public Works Loan Board has indicated that before it was prepared to make such a decision, it would need to know about the capacity to repay that loan and about the impact on the precept of the parish. It is not given the level of confidence that is being purported in that. And I think that needs to be recognised. We have heard that the council, this council, has had no sight of quantity surveyors' figures, which place a very much higher cost to this project than the costs that have been provided to the council to date. Much has been made of my position on Stretham as a county councillor on the Community Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee. This project had been red flagged by officers for a long time. It had been red flagged by the cross-party working group of the council set up to look at these, along with a number of other red flagged projects. All of those other projects managed to get over the various issues with them and come forward as projects that had a realistic prospect of success. This one did not. And when we asked at that meeting about the funding of this project, it transpired, and it took a fair amount of sort of rumpole of the Bailey to get this information out. But it transpired that the whole project was now, the original scheme had been put to the county council at 1.6 million. It had now been divided into 3 phases, of which the first phase alone was 1.6 million. The GP surgery has been persistently dangled like a carrot in front of residents to get them to accept the scheme. And while, you know, yes, medical facilities are very much to be welcomed in growing communities, and it's very difficult when a community isn't large enough to sustain an entire GP practice on its own. But this has been dangled here. It's in phase 3. And there is, again, no certainty, nothing tied down about the medical input into this. And there are question marks about that as to everything else. We've been told that there's detailed information available about the costs. That is simply not true. There are so many question marks that it's impossible to be confident about all the finances of this. And I really don't think that I can vote for this list of projects as long as this lays the ground open for the district council to pay the money over to Stretham Parish Council in advance of the elections in May and the review that the new council might wish to undertake of this, which is what the people of Stretham democratically voted for. So my view is that I cannot support it for the reasons of the inclusion of Stretham, and I am absolutely confident that there will be word going out from the Tory members opposite saying that that the Liberal Democrats have voted.
Councillor Austin.
Yeah, okay, vote like a Tory, be a Tory. But what I am confident about is that there will be that word going out that the Liberal Democrats don't want Witchford to have a village hall expansion, don't want the people of Bottisham to have a cemetery, don't want all of these things. It will be completely untrue. And I will say that here now, that has never stopped you before, but it'll be completely untrue. And that, yeah, laugh, okay, it's all good fun, isn't it? Fun and Jates, tell lies and get away with it. But what I will say here is that the reason for this is the concern that there exists about Stretham and about this project. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want to see Stretham have a village hall or a community centre. That's fine. That's up to the people of Stretham. But it doesn't mean it has to be this project, which has been so beset by issues at County Council and is so beset by issues here, and which the public feels very strongly needs to have a second look, and they want their parish council to do that. And I think we should respect that.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. I was on the scoring panel. I came on it with only a day to spare, and I had to read the papers online. Councillor Bailey is quite wrong that all members were tremendously excited by all these projects. My scoring was actually quite at variance with some of the other, the main bulk of the panel. So that is one thing. I did remark at that meeting, and couldn't have a look at all the papers exactly, but that, and as Councillor Bailey has said, it is for capital funding. Yet we see refurbishment, Stretham Town Rangers Football Club, Community Club refurbishment, the refurbishment of Main Hall, refurbishment. Sorry, could I not interrupt, please? So some of that, and it's quite clear, there is refurbishment. And we also mentioned the fact that the Viva apprenticeship should not be part of the funding. And we noticed that the whole funding of what has been secured by the applying organization is actually the exact amount of the apprenticeship funding. So actually it hasn't secured any funding on its own. There's some promise from the Cambridgeshire Combined Authority. So I just found some of these things And that was a variance. I was actually almost the other way around when you looked at the actual papers. So I just thought, I think we ought to really look at whether it is refurbishment or capital. That's one thing. The other thing is, I thought that 2 months, I know we had to, well, we didn't, we could have spent it by March. That 2 months was really not enough for the whole district to actually have a go at it. So we ought to be really looking at that infrastructure for the whole district. How many communities, how many parishes do not have a village hall? Do we know this? Shouldn't we be supporting that? Stretham already has a village hall. Should we look, but in 2 months, for a village, a parish that does not have a village hall, does not have a parish hall, to come up with some costed and planned expenditure was just not going to be enough. It is really, to my mind, this has been a project. I think some of them wonderful. I scored quite highly on quite a number of these projects, but I think some of them ought to be looked at again because they are a refurbishment, and also that we ought to be looking at a much longer timescale. In future, we must actually look at the whole needs of the whole district and not just those projects which have already been almost costed and funded in advance. Thank you very much.
Councillor Trapp. Further? If not, back to Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to address some of the points that have been made. Councillor Dupre made some comments again about Stretham Hub and match funding, but in her concerns about the Public Works Loan Board. And I just want to remind everybody that if the Public Works Loan Board money is not secured, the district council money will not be paid. So this council's money is not at risk in any way. So you need to be voting on that basis. Councillor Dupre was concerned that the council hadn't examined the quantity surveyor figures. The council hasn't received and examined quantity surveyor figures for, I don't think, any of the projects on the list. That is not how this fund works. It is not how, the delivery of this kind of funding is required to work. It's not how the approach to SIL works, and we've delivered many successful community infrastructure levy funded and supported projects. So this project is no different to the other ones on the list. We haven't looked at quantity surveyor figures for the National Trust project or the Bottisham new cemetery, and yet Councillor Dupre doesn't seem to be raising any concerns about that. So, I think it's clear that she has a very fixated concern about Stretham Hub only. It is absolutely clear from what Stretham Parish Council has said, and the planning application would support this, that the funding that is being requested is to deliver phase 1 and phase 3. I think the use of the word phase is important. What we are being asked to fund and support here and to help fund is the community hub and the GP rooms. They happen to have been labelled 1 and 3, but that is, to be clear, that is what we're being asked to support or to vote against. It's pretty clear that the Lib Dems don't want all the things on the list. If our colleagues opposite want projects to go ahead on the list, then they need to vote for them. It's all very simple, really. I understand that Councillor Dupre doesn't want to see the GP surgery and the hub in Stretham go ahead. She's made that abundantly clear on more than one occasion and at more than one authority.
Chair, point
Councillor
of personal explanation. You will recall that I said that I was specifically not saying Stretham should not have a community centre or village hall. I specifically said that. I simply pointed out that it need not be, and it may well not be and should not be, this particular project to deliver that. That was what I said. I'm not going to be misrepresented in that way.
Okay, so I think it's clear that Councillor Dupre doesn't support this particular project at Stretham. That is clear. Councillor Trapp is concerned about refurbishment. I think Councillor Trapp's perhaps mixing up what is meant by capital funding. capital funding, like, for example, we heard a lot about the Isleham kitchen project, which, you know, could be described as a refurbishment, but it is a new kitchen, a sort of more upgraded commercial type kitchen. That is a refurbishment. It's a refurbishment of the kitchen, but it is capital funding. In other words, it's not revenue funding. We're not paying for the gas to turn the cooker on. We're paying to buy the cooker. It's that simple. So this money is only available for capital funds, and Sally will only sign off and ask Ian to hand over money for capital funds, and Ian won't let money go out the door unless it's for capital items. That is absolutely clear, because otherwise Horizons can claw it back from us, and we won't be letting that happen.
Explanation there. There's a difference between upgrading and refurbishment, such as for, I can't remember now, somewhere in the Isleham, I think, and where it is just redecorating the bar and other things. So there's quite a big difference there. Thank you very much.
No, so don't forget, people have described their whole project, and we are paying for certain elements of that project, but their project is bigger than the elements that we are paying for. So the fact that they repaint the kitchen with their own funding is not what we are paying for. We are paying for the capital elements of the project. We're only allowed to pay for capital elements of the project from this funding. So I just wanted to make that clear. And that is the basis on which checks will be signed or bank transfers will be made. Councillor Trapp was concerned about Viva apprenticeships should not be funded through this fund. We're not funding Viva apprenticeships through this fund. The funding request that we heard about at the working group is for the creation of a hub. It's to provide the facility in the building to allow the apprenticeships to take place. That is what we're paying for. And Councillor Trapp also said that we should be looking at infrastructure for the whole district. I mean, we could have spent this £2 million looking at the needs of every village and community in our district, but it wouldn't have delivered. We'd have spent the money and we wouldn't have delivered any facilities in our community. So what we did with this fund, which does have an ultimate deadline on it, and I think it was absolutely right, was to put out to our communities and make this available to our communities and ask our communities what they want. They know better. Streatham knows better. Little Thetford knows better what it needs in its village than we do. And that is the basis. Everybody, we wrote to all parish councils. Everybody had the opportunity to put in bids for this fund. And they still have the opportunity. We have significant community infrastructure levy funds in this organisation. They come from development. We save up the money. And Councillor Trapp, we've got community facilities included as an item on our SIL list. So any project that wants to come forward, we absolutely throw the doors open and welcome it. And if communities want to put new village halls and new facilities forward for funding, they can do so. It's on our SIL list, and so long as they meet all the criteria, and they will get funded, so they can come forward. This is not the end of the funding that's available through this authority. We would have blown the budget looking and trying to consult with all our communities about what they wanted. Much better just to ask them and get them to bid for funds. So I am absolutely delighted to be supporting this, and I hope that everybody will support these incredibly valuable projects on this list. I think it would be a great shame if this can't be a unanimous vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Members, we now go to the vote. Sorry, Councillor.
Can I ask for a recorded vote?
Yep. Tracy.
Okay, so you are voting on the motion, which is the recommendations in the report. So when I call your name, can you say whether you're voting for, against, or abstaining? Councillor David Ambrose Smith. For. Councillor Sue Austin. For. Councillor Anna Bailey. For. Councillor Ian Bobbington.
For.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Abstain.
Excuse me. Councillor Simon Harries. Councillor Julia Huffer.
For.
Councillor John Trapp. And have I missed anybody? Councillor Wilson, yes, Councillor Gareth Wilson. Okay. So that motion is carried by 6 votes for, with no votes against and 4 abstentions.
Thank you, Tracy. Please, Councillor Bailey, we just asked Councillor Coldsake. Great. Thank you. That concludes agenda item number 7. We now move to agenda item number 8. Community Infrastructure Levy Funding Request, Stretham Community Hub. I can ask Sally Bonnet to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Stretham Parish Council have submitted an application requesting Community Infrastructure Levy (CIL) funding contribution of £766,666 towards the Stretham Community Hub project. The hub will provide new community facility, including a main hall, community cafe, kitchens and courtyards in phase 1, linked to micro retail units in phase 2, and a GP premises and additional function rooms at phase 3. The CIL funding is for phases 1 and 3. The project will deliver a new community facility and is therefore included on the council's CIL infrastructure list, and as such is capable of benefiting from CIL funding. Again, this application was received prior to the parish poll, and the previously circulated update from Stretham Parish Council applies to this agenda item also.
Thank you, Sally. Can I have a proposer and a second for the recommendations?
Happy to propose.
Councillor Bailey, seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
Councillor Bovingdon. We have an amendment. I have been informed that I was wrong last time round and that you should have been given the right to speak when you were proposing them. So would you like to, Councillor Bailey, before we go to the amendment?
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, point of procedure, on the previous item, you took the questions, I think, before you took either the amendment or the substantive item.
So I've got it wrong twice. Obviously, don't listen to my advice properly.
Sorry,
we'll
could
go
I
to the
just-
questions.
You are taking questions now, are you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Could I just ask officers, does this scheme have planning consent yet?
No.
No, in which case, how in 3.5 can it be due to commence before the end of in 2022? Because there would have to be a decision notice. There would surely have to be building control undertaken. There would have to be Section 106 agreements signed. There would have to be a whole panoply of documentation. How can it start before the end of 2022 if there's no planning consent?
So that information was listed from the application form. Obviously, it just says project is due to commence. It doesn't say construction. So potentially it's other elements of the project other than actual construction.
But if it doesn't have planning permission, it can't, we've just heard, get the Public Works Loan Board. So it doesn't have the money behind it before it starts the project. How does that work? How does the timing work in here? Has nobody questioned that?
If I can try and assist, Chairman. As Sally's already indicated, there are some works that go on without being physical works on the site, and there are works that can go on that don't cost any money for the parish council, for example. But I think what to draw your attention to is that regardless of when there's a planned project, if there's slippage because of planning permissions, etc., there will be a condition within the funding agreement that says you can't, you won't get funding without planning permissions being in place and that sort of thing. So there are mechanisms in there to protect the district council in case of slippage of project starts, etc., that will make sure that the funding isn't given ahead of time.
Sorry, Chair, I'm unconvinced. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
There are a number of factual inaccuracies in this which need to be corrected before we can vote on it. So the first thing is, first of all, Stretham Parish Council is requesting CIL funding contribution of 766,666. May I point out that that's the mark of the beast. We are asked to fund 700,000. So which is it? 766,666 or 700,000. So that's the first thing. The second point is planning application followed a large community consultation exercise which confirm the need for the project. We've heard from the village poll that there is dissatisfaction about the consultation exercise. I therefore feel that it's a dubious statement to make, at least without a counter statement or on the lines that some people disagree with this, or the parish poll clearly showed a disagreement with this. But more serious, 3.5, parish council secured £670,000 total project cost. Well, they haven't. We know that they're going through the process, but this states they have secured. At this moment, they have not secured. So this is a false statement, which needs to be removed before we can vote upon it. And just underneath it, it says 700,000, whereas 3.3 says 766,666. And it just seems to me that this is an absolute mess. I don't understand why you allow a paper within internal contradictions like this to come forward, because you're actually asking us to vote on something that the parish council itself has told us in writing is not true, which we obviously got. Oh, and by the way, the parish council's letter gives a different sum for the growth and infrastructure fund. It's under 700,000. So this is just not correct. It is therefore not capable of being voted on, because you're asking us to vote on a series of statements that are flat contradicted by the parish council, or that in two cases happen to be false. So would somebody like to take this away and rewrite it and maybe bring it back to the next meeting? So I don't see how we can vote on this without rewriting.
Thank you, Chair. The £700,000 figure at 3.5 refers to the growth and infrastructure application, which we've just considered. So this it's just referring to that figure. So that's not what we're being asked for from SIL. That's a separate fund.
Sorry, maybe it's because I'm as deaf as a post. Could you just run that by me again? What do we actually? Oh, great. Okay, I get it.
Yep. Okay. Then you mentioned about the public consultation at 3.4. So the poll is mentioned in the report at 3.6. And then we refer to parish council at 3.7. And then
sorry, I just got to come back on that. You mentioned the parish poll, you don't mention the result. And as a result, this does not count as a counterbalance on what you said in 3.4. On the contrary, it is practically an egregious way of pushing it under the carpet. You know, it is almost a falsification. The poll was held, you don't say what the result was. That's the only relevant point about it, literally the only relevant point.
so at 3.7, the first line is the proposal to which the question relates, referring to the question for the parish poll, was carried on the 10th of November 2020. So that's, sorry, I haven't put the figures in, but I have put the result in and that it was carried.
In that case, a personal apology to you, Sally, for being a fool. Beg your pardon, and to everybody else.
Just and the final point about the figures. So the 650 is the Public Works Loan Board. The Stretham Parish Council identify other funding within their application to come up to the 750 figure. And then just on the point of securing the funding, as the letter from Stretham Parish Council set out, as far as they can, without the benefit of planning permission, they have done as much as they can to secure the funding. And as has been said previously, it will be a condition of the grant agreement that full evidence of all match funding is provided prior to any ECDC funding being released.
Yeah, fine. In future, I think you need to change wording of this kind. Has secured means has secured. Is applying means is applying. Believes it will achieve is believes it will achieve. These are all different states. Has secured is an absolute. We've got it. in our hands. Now, that isn't the case, and that's why I'd like the wording changed to reflect the reality, which is slightly different.
We'll be in the minutes. Any other questions to Sally? Councillor Wilson.
Can I ask, is this going to be part of this financial year's seal application, or is it really going to be next financial year? Because it looks to me from what we've been talking about, it's not going to happen until after March 31st, because planning will take that long for starters.
So seal doesn't work in that way. So the money is secured for that project, because obviously sometimes projects, because we pay out on milestones, so sometimes projects span across 2 financial years. So the money is secured and we pay out as when they meet the milestones as agreed in the funding agreement.
Councillor Bailey, you want, if there's no further questions to Sally, do you want to speak to your proposal, and then we'll go to the amendment?
Yeah, thank you. So I really don't think there's any material problem about when the project is due to commence. As Sally said, I think that was the wording that was written in the application form from some considerable time ago when the application form was completed. But I don't see that that has a material impact on our decision of whether or not to provide, make seal funds available. And I think the use of seal funds to deliver, a community hub and GP rooms, consulting rooms, which we know are badly needed, is an absolutely appropriate use of our funds. It's exactly what it's designed, the kind of thing it's designed to deliver to support growth. And so I'm totally supportive of this. And I think we've rehearsed all of the other discussions in the previous item, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Members, we have an amendment in front of before us. Councillor Dupre.
The same amendment as for the previous item and for exactly the same reasons.
Councillor Dupre. Councillor Harries, seconding and reserving your right as you. Can I appeal that we do not go over what has been said in the previous item? Members, over to you. We move to the debate. If there's going to be. Councillor Dupre. Oh, sorry, you're going to.
Sorry, you're still on the debate on the amendment.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Those against, please show.
The amendment is lost by 4 votes to 7.
Tracy, we move to the substantive as detailed in agenda item number 8. Members, any debate, or do we go straight to the vote? Straight to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Those against?
Motion is carried by 7 votes to 4.
Thank you. Members, we've been going 2 hours. Would you like a few minutes break? Or do you just want to carry on? Push on.
Prefer to carry on.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Chair, may I make a comment? When I was out of the room, I tried to follow it online. I just implore everybody, you'd be amazed what you miss online when people are not on their mics. I think I said that last time. You just don't hear it at all. So I was trying to follow it. So, and that's to officers, members, and everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you for that observation, Councillor Goltek. And apologies therefore to all the other people who are watching. We now move to agenda item number 9, which is an appointment to the Littleport and Downham Internal Drainage Board. Tracy, would you like to introduce this paper?
Thank you, Chairman. As you'll be aware, we have some vacancies on the internal drainage boards, and Caroline, as Senior Democratic Services Officer, approached the relevant parishes, and we have had 2 applications come forward for the Littleport and Downham Internal Drainage Board. I can never say that. You'll see there are statements in 3.4 and 3.5 from the two applicants, and it's a matter for members to decide.
Thank you, Tracy. I will propose from the chair that we're going to appoint either Councillor Butcher or Councillor Palmer to the IDB. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. Members. Firstly, I guess there aren't any questions to Tracy on this. What I will say as background is I had a word with Mrs. Heading at the internal drainage boards when we had the Stretham IDB last week, in the hope that there might have been 2 vacancies on Littleport, but there isn't. There's only 1. So we are going to have to appoint one of either Councillors Butcher or Palmer. Does anybody have anything they wish to say before we go to a vote? Right, in that case, Councillor Harris.
Just wanted to say they both seem very good people, but there may be other vacancies over the next year in other drainage boards.
I'll come on to that.
Okay, that's good.
Right, members will now vote by a show of hands. Can all those in favour of appointing Councillor Butcher please show? Thank you. All those in favour of Councillor Palmer, please show. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Well, that's 5 each, is it?
That's, I had 3 to 5. Right. No. So I should. Yeah.
Councillor
Yeah,
Dupre
we
abstain.
need to, because I had 3 for the first one and 5 for the second one.
Sorry, can we show again? Because I'm not convinced by it. Those for Councillor Butcher, please show again.
Sorry,
Well, we couldn't go with the 3. Those for Councillor Palmer, please show. Right. Any abstentions?
That's the one.
No. Yeah. Right, so Councillor Palmer is our nominated person. Members.
Could you read the results out, please, because I'm not clear.
So it was 4 votes for Councillor Butcher, 6 votes for Councillor Palmer and 1 abstention. So that means Councillor Palmer is elected. Or appointed, I should say. I beg your pardon.
Right. Members, I'd like to thank both councillors for putting their name forward, and I think we should write and say that. But shall we write to Councillor Butcher to ask whether he'd be interested in one of the council's vacancies on either Padnell and Waterden or Caudle Fen IDBs, since he's shown interest in.
Excellent idea.
Because we do have 1 vacancy on Padnell and Waterden and 3 vacancies on Caudle Fen within our gift. So Tracy, can we arrange for that to happen? Thank you. Right, we now move on to agenda item 10, Treasury Operations Mid-Year Review. Ian, over to you to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. The council continues to hold significant cash balances, allowing it to fund all current and planned capital projects from internal borrowing. In addition, the increase in interest rates resulting in substantially higher interest receipts than forecast when the budget was set. Members are asked to approve the report going forward to the full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. From the chair, I will propose that we recommend this report to this mid-year review to full council. I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. Members, any comments, questions for Ian? Councillor Harries?
The obvious thing, page 3, economics update, figures are wrong. We're in recession. The economy is shrinking. Inflation is now above 11% and much higher for basic foodstuffs, which are obviously hitting the lower paid. And the energy support package has been time limited now, as we all know. Obviously, that all happened very recently, so it's extremely difficult to make sure that what's published is completely current. But I think this is just a word to whoever it is that drafts this. There is still an attempt to spin too much. You know, the economy grows. There are falls in the composite PMI, things of this kind. You know, we do need to be realistic about this, because all of the problems in this economics update are going to hit us all as individuals and the people we represent. So happy to note, absolutely happy to note. Generally, I think this is a well-written document. It normally is, but I just think maybe hold off to the last possible moment and allow a little note of pessimism to come in, because it's actually realism.
If I can answer that to you, Chair.
Yep.
Paragraph 6.2 of the report does make it clear that this is a report for the end of September, and the economic outlook at the end of September is that which is detailed. Clearly, we all know things have moved on from then, but this is the position at the end of September.
Thanks, Ian. Members, anything further in the debate? Or are we all content, Councillor Bailey?
I just want to say thank you to Ian and his team for their careful administration of the council's finances, because it's a dry old report, Treasury Management, but honestly, it really blooming matters, and we should say thank you.
Absolutely. All in favour of referring to full council? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, we now move to items for noting. Agenda item 11 is service delivery plans, 6-month performance monitoring. Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Not much to say on this item, but I just want to update members at Operational Services Committee last week. There was discussion around the level of information they received at the 6-month review point, and perhaps it was rather light. So what I did was undertake and agree to review how we did the 6-month reporting, recognise that the way we did it before was slightly burdensome on officers. This one's maybe more of a light touch. So I undertook to do a sort of kind of if there was a halfway house. So we will look to ensure that we do something different for next year that members would be happy to receive and note. But it's good news for most services, and only exceptional reporting, which is set out in the report, where services are off track on where they expect to be at this point, at the 6-month point throughout the year. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions for Emma? Or are we happy to note? Noted then. Brings us on to agenda item 13, since we've already done 12, public conveniences access audit. Can I welcome Spencer Clark and ask him to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is have the privilege of bringing this report to committee. Pretty much the audit showed that on the whole our accessible toilets are fit for purpose, with a few minor recommendations from the report, which most of them now have been carried out, and they are simple adjustments that mean a lot to the people that use the facilities. And that's like examples are repositioning mirrors, adding mirrors, and changing some of the handrails to different colours, so there's a contrast between the wall and the actual fittings, which is only very simple but mean a lot to a lot of people. We've also looked at the signage as part of the audit, and that's been quite enlightening as well. We've now got Braille as part of the signage on most of the doors, apart from Palace Green, which is a particularly difficult one to fit signage to, because we only have the walls on the outside, because there's no actual doors to Palace Green, only gates. and there's limitations what we can fit to the walls on there. So, but apart from that, they now have braille, and we've also looked at the signage for more awareness, especially for we're adding signage to all the toilets, not just to the accessible toilets, for that not all disabilities are visible, which I think is quite an important point to make and help educate the public as a whole. So, and part of the audit raised the question about whether or not we should have more ambulance toilets in there. If I've said that correctly, I hope I have. An ambulance toilet is one that has more facilities in it. It's not quite a fully accessible toilet, but it's more, and it's open to everybody to use in a normal toilet facility. But it has more adaptations for more easier use. We're proposing that we're going to have a look at whether or not we can adapt one of the Palace Green toilets to have ambulance toilets, or ambulance cubicles, I should say, as they don't have an accessible toilet at the moment. So that's our proposal. And if that goes quite well, we might be able to roll that out across some of our other public toilets. And finally, it's obviously been made aware that obviously a lot of people that travel with disabilities look before they leave to see what facilities are out there. So we should make sure that our website is currently up to date and fit for purpose and giving the information that people want. That's mainly the recommendations from the report, and I think we're following up with most of those. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you for a very clear and very comprehensive report. Members, any questions for Spencer? Councillor Austin.
Spencer, this is really good, but I have to say, looking at the ambulance toilets, and it's the same with the accessible toilets, it actually says lower, I haven't got my glasses on, sorry, lower the toilet pans. Now, if people have got knee problems, back problems, or hip problems indeed, it's all very well having rails, but to actually lower yourself down onto the toilet is very difficult. And I mean, same with these Cambs ones, the toilets are too low. So I think we need to look at that. Because I have had some, I mean, I have a problem, but I've had ward members that have actually contacted me and said, oh, Sue, can't you do something about it? Because they find it very difficult. And I find it difficult.
And that's with the ambulance toilets, not with the accessible toilets.
But yeah, it's both. It would be both, yeah. Probably need to go up about 3-4 inches.
One for you to take away, Spencer. Any other comments, or are we happy to note? Councillor Dupre.
Just very pleased indeed with the report, and pleased to see that a result of our motion, we got not only a bid for the second round of the fully accessible changing places toilets, but also some improvements to our main ones. So thank you.
Right, happy to, thanks, Spencer. Moves us to item 14, the annual infrastructure funding statement. Can I ask Sally Bonnet to introduce this item?
Thank you. Not going to say too much because it's just a factual report on the income for the last financial year. But I'd just like to draw members' attention to the fact that in addition to the projects that we fund on the SIL infrastructure list, 1.3 million was passed to parishes as what's called the meaningful proportion, which is the parish element of SIL.
Thank you, Sally. Members, any comments, questions to Sally on this straight factual report, which is going to be published on the website? If not, are we happy to note? Noted. Thank you. Brings us on to 15, finance report. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The council is currently forecasting a small underspend at year end. Individual variances for this committee are detailed in section 3.6 of the report. Also to note, the pay award for staff will be included in the monthly staff pay, which is going out tomorrow. So the pressure in relation to this will be shown on individual service lines in the reports which you receive in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Members, questions to Ian? If not, we're asked to note the report. Noted, and thank you for reiterating the thanks from the earlier item, Ian, as well to you and your team. Brings us on to agenda item 16, assets update. Spencer, over to you again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm happy to report that the gullies in Barton Road have all been replaced at the top end of Barton Road, but they're particularly bad. That's been well received just lately, especially with all the rainfall that we've had. We've also took the opportunity, as the mayor has now vacated the buildings on 70 Market Street, to tidy up the windows and doors and get it ready to go back onto market for hopefully a new tenant. Then we've been mainly focusing on the depot project recently. Obviously, the primary objectives initially were to make us EA compliant with our foul water and install better security systems and security measures at the depot. As those projects are now well under hand, in fact, the security fencing is now complete, the CCTVs and that is being installed as we speak, and the tender for the waste treatment plant is now completed. So we can now start reviewing what the budgets we've got left and look at the next phase of the operations, which will be like for staff accommodation, office facilities and welfare facilities at the depot. So that's pretty much the update for now. I have to take any questions.
Thank you, Spencer. Any questions for Spencer on this report? Councillor Trapp? Sorry, Councillor Trapp, could you put the microphone on, please?
I'm so sorry. Normally it's the other way around again. There's a number of budget expenditures against which we don't know what's happening to them. For instance, public car parks, 43,500. Is it to be started to? I mean, should every line have some kind of comment about the notes, or is it going to be started?
Yeah, certainly going forward, I could certainly put more detail into the document, but a lot of the works are still being planned and going through. So it's I can update, but it's much better. I'll tell you what's been completed rather than what's started, because some of the projects can be quite long. We can put more detail into the report.
Now, just thinking, planned, started, or finished would be quite good.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Anything further? If not, are we happy to note? Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. Item 17, bus cycle walk working party notes. We have the notes in front of us and they're just for us to receive. Item 18 is the forward agenda plan. And we have it in front of us. Tracy, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, Chairman, I haven't been notified of any changes so far, but I'm sure there'll be some things that will be added and taken away for the January meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. Just asking when the business plan on your crematorium at Meeple will be on the board plan.
Through you, Chair, we need to review that. It will, because the funding strategy committees come here, I just need to factor in when that will come, because it's not known for definite exactly when that is yet, because we're in the planning commission's been issued, we're in the JR period, so that will be fed as to when the funding strategy will come to this committee.
Thank you. Right, members, we now move to exempt items. If any member does not agree with the exclusion of the public, including representatives of the press, can they please indicate now? If not, can I thank those watching the live stream, as this concludes the public part of the meeting. Thank you all, and my apologies, because clearly you weren't able to follow everything from what Councillor Goldsack has informed committee. We'll try and do better next time.